my Vader Dom's pad sticks. This is so cool. These are the Vader Dom's pad sticks that Alan put together. And this easily is the best version of my pad stick I have ever had. And I'll tell you why for a few reasons. First of all, out of the mind of Alan Vader. Alan is an incredible, he really is, an incredible master at knowing wood and the context of wood and how to develop wood so it can last the longest amount of time for us. So when we're playing on the drums and whatever we're doing, we've got a stick in our hand that has a consistent feeling all the time. This really is pretty special at different levels. I've known Alan for many, many years. And we discussed about the pad stick, and Alan's suggestion was to use a sugar maple. Sugar maple is a whole nother feel and consistency that Alan was able to put together. And on the sticks, I like a certain tacky finish. I hold the stick very loose in my hand. And I want to make sure I'm not getting any text in here from Chad. Let me open up my phone here. Fantastic. So with this here, I like a certain tackiness because the technique that I teach is this free stroke, which is the technique that I learned from Joe Morello, who learned from George Lawrence Stone, George Lawrence Stone being the author of Stick Control. Et voila. So what happened was this free stroke, this rebound movement in your hands, you want to hold the stick as loosely as possible. Well, if the stick has a little bit of a tackiness to it and a little bit of a finish to it, the stick stays better in your hand. So in the course of this process, in my discussions with Alan and his great team over back at Vader, they discussed how to do this here by putting several more coats. I believe they're putting 5 coats of finish on this. And the tackiness is just subtle enough where it fits into your hands. And just the movement of how that stick feels in your hand. I am totally relaxed. I'm holding the stick very loosely, and the stick is staying in my hand. So that's the two things, the sugar maple and the tackiness of that stick. The design was designed after the Bunken 3S. Now, those of you that know the story, you will have heard me say this several times. Bunken 3S was the stick that I had asked Joe Morello, what stick did you use when you were practicing as a young kid? And Joe said to me, the Bunken 3S, B-U-N-K-E-N, the Bunken 3S. 3S was the model of the stick, and Bunken was the company. And I have a Bunken 3S here. Check this out. You see that? Oh boy, Bunken 3S. Now, Bunken was a stick company that was a husband and wife team, Bunny and Ken, hence the name Bunken. 3S was the stick size, and you can see it's got like a ball of the stick on there, and it's made out of maple, a very, very light sugar maple. And this stick, Morello felt Stone wanted them to over-exaggerate their movement, so by having a longer stick, but not a heavy stick. That was the key thing. That's part of what the maple is. Maple makes it lighter, and by it being a lighter stick, the stick is a larger stick, like a marching stick, so I have to over-exaggerate that motion of my wrist. That's where the development comes in. That's what Stone wanted, hence Morello used the Bunken 3S. Well, it turned out, years later, when I talked to Jim Chapin, the top student under Sanford Moeller, when I said to Jim, what stick did Moeller like you to use? Jim said, the Bunken 3S. Now, this to me was kind of mind-blowing in the process. Well, eventually in time, 1976, I go out to California so I can study with Shelly Mann. I studied with Morello, I studied with Chapin, and they felt I was ready to go out to Shelly Mann. Morello was the best student under George Lawrence Stone, so I wanted to learn that Stone free stroke wrist movement. Then after Morello, I went to Chapin to learn that Moeller arm whip motion. Once I started getting that down, then Chapin said, you're ready for Shelly Mann to understand the Gladstone, the Billy Gladstone finger movement. So kind of interesting to see in that motion. So the Gladstone finger movement actually came easier because I had the George Lawrence Stone method of free stroke and Chapin's molar in my hands. Gladstone became easier. So that was the order that they felt it was good to learn. Stone, molar, then Gladstone. Listen, people can achieve greatness by not following that routine. That's what I followed through by the guidance of these wonderful teachers. And that's pretty much how I teach. I get students to understand the free stroke in their wrist. Then we talk about molar in the whip. And then we get into Gladstone in their fingers. So that became the journey. Well, the Bunken 3S, when I went to find a Bunken 3S at that time, they didn't make them anymore. So I had gone to a store, actually up in the Connecticut, Rhode Island area, and I found a store that had one Bunken 3S stick. This is it here. Let's go back to the late 70s. I had the Bunken 3S. I found this one stick, and then I went and I found a marching stick that was a maple stick, and I kind of sanded it down so it kind of looked like the Bunken 3S. I kind of mapped it down and kind of sanded it, and then I put a spray varnish on it. I kind of sprayed it in my room, and I made myself a pair of a very crude pair of Bunken 3S. Well, in the course of time, it turns out that Alan Vader, his first facility was the old Bunken factory. So it was so great to have the history just come full circle, where Alan, being schooled and understood about all these Bunken sticks, was able to put together my pad stick in the history of what those Bunkens were. Well, in time, I was able to have a second Bunken stick that came to me, and I've got a pair of Bunken sticks here, and these sticks probably go back about 80 years easily. So it's a pair of Bunken sticks that I still keep in my studio in the course of my teaching program here of what I have. So Alan Vader goes out with his team, and they make my current Dom's pad stick. These are only sold on my website, domfamularo.com. You can go there on the online store. It's available. We ship them everywhere around the world. I've sold hundreds of them in the last couple of months. And it really is, for me, the best feeling of a stick that I've ever had. And they come like this here. You'll see when you take them out, you'll see the gloss on them and the tackiness on them and how they are. And just out of the brilliance of Alan Vader, he was able to pull this off. So now that we've got the stick that I have, I went and I brought my crude Bunken remake to a lesson with Morello. Morello sees them, plays with the sticks, and says, "Wow, these are great Bunken sticks. Where'd you get them?" I said, "Joe, they're not really Bunken sticks." I said, "I kind of made them on my own." He said to me, "Make me a pair." So I made a pair. I went back home, got another Scottish pair, sanded them down, sprayed them up, brought them to Morello. He loved them. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Jim Chapin. I spoke to Morello. "Where are my Bunken sticks?" I said, "Jim, they're not really Bunken sticks." I tell the story. Chapin says, "Make me a pair." And if you go back and look at any old pictures of Chapin, go do a Google search of Jim Chapin on a practice pad. You will see him in all of the pictures. He's playing with my Dom's pad sticks. He loved the sticks. It brought him back to his youth, and that's what Mola wanted him to play. Several weeks later, after talking to Chapin, I get a call from Shelly Mann, who at that time was living out in the West Coast. They used to call me Fam. Shelly Mann says, "Fam, I spoke to Chapin and Morello. Where are my Bunken 3S?" So I got a kick that these guys all wanted these Bunken 3S's. So I made a pair for Shelly Mann and sent it out to Shelly Mann. And Shelly Mann was just such another wonderful, phenomenal person and really a professor at the knowledge that he had as far as his skill. And Shelly Mann was probably one of the top students, best students of Billy Gladstone. So I was very, very fortunate because of where I live here on Long Island that I was able to take some lessons with Morello, who lived in New Jersey. It was about a 5-hour drive to get to Jersey to see where Joe's lessons were. I'd go by there, take lessons with Morello, came back. Jim Chapin lived here on Long Island. So I lucked up by having Jim very close to me here, going by and taking lessons with Jim. And then when they said I was ready for Shelly Mann, Shelly lived in California. I had put a band together with some dear friends, Frank Goldstein and Antonio Pesano. We put a band together, keyboard, bass, and drums. We drove to California, went out there to put the band together to play out there. and I was able to take lessons with Shelly Mann. Just a beautiful guy. And while out there, I also studied with Johnny Gurin, another phenomenal drummer, Jim Keltner, Joe Porcaro. All these great players were out there, Colin Bailey, and I was able to, at 1976, that's where I had met Jeff Porcaro, and that's a whole other story. Jeff became a dear friend and was just an incredible, beautiful player and person. We have some great, great memories. So it all kind of came down to these Bunken sticks that I was able to practice with and learn these techniques.